Rebel Devs Podcast, a show that challenges conventional thinking in the tech industry. Each episode features conversations with solutionists who have taken unconventional approaches to problem solving, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in their respective fields. Join the devolution.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back to the Rebel Devs Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Tom May, with my partner in crime, Jonah May.
Howdy, guys.
Coming back today, we have Geoff Burke from ObjectFirst. How you doing, Geoff?
Not bad. Not bad at all.
Good deal. Is it still Friday where you are?
It's still Friday. We're in a loop, one of those while and keep it there. Actually, I should do that for Saturday, perhaps. Maybe Friday is not a good idea.
Yeah. Well, you have the fun job of being the community manager. We were talking before the show. And so you get to do these things professionally now. I guess, did you see that in your career trajectory?
Well, the funny thing is that my original education was in linguistics. It had nothing to do with IT or technology. In fact, I wasn't even part of the computer club in high school, and I didn't like math or anything like that. So, but as we all know, life forces us to jump into different rivers and different streams. And I kind of thought that my, let's say, show person was gone, that career was over. The modeling career, the Hollywood was finished. And then what happened was I started to get involved with these communities, specifically with the Veeam community. And I started to realize, wait a minute, personality is important, it turns out. It turns out you can have fun, you can talk, and you can be entertaining in the tech world. In fact, not only can, but sometimes you must, because you end up having a personal brand, which then you can promote, and it helps you in your career, helps you get jobs. So one thing led to another, and I enjoyed it, and it was fun. I saw a merge of two things I really like. One, technology, IT specifically, data protection, but also the kind of showmanship. And this has resulted in actually getting a job. So yeah, this is fantastic. I mean, I get to keep studying. I keep up to date with technology. At the same time, though, I'm expected to present, talk on shows, make jokes, make things original, funny. So it's a lot of fun.
That is absolutely awesome. Some of the listeners know, and I don't know if you know or not, but I actually am an ordained minister still in the Methodist Church.
Wow.
So
okay.
I came up through technology and was involved in church work, went to seminary. That's kind of what brought me to Texas. And then I realized maybe I'm not so much of the professional church guy, because I did a lot of street ministry sort of stuff. I mean, I'm the guy that was hanging out with bikers and everything else, dropping F-bombs, just normal dude, whatever. And then I realized I don't like this whole professional thing. And it's funny because prior to that, I was drama as a kid and did some acting and whatnot and went the whole audition thing. And people would talk to me like about preaching, and they'd be like, well, what is it really like? And I'd be like, God's honest truth. I think it's like stand-up comedy. Like, people don't understand that, but like, you have to hook them. You're bringing them in. You're doing a lot of illustrations. And I'll tell you, sometimes I think stand-up comedy, I think I would absolutely enjoy it, but I'm so terrified to actually take the jump into it. So, this is the closest I get as a captive audience on here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's not a mistake that they call people evangelists, tech evangelists. They've taken that for a reason. I think one of the things we forget, especially people in technology, and if you're in front of a computer screen all day, is that at the end of the day, we are humans, and humans are very different from machines. We're a bundle of emotional cycles and things like this going on. We react. I read a story when I did my first year. I did economics in university first year course, and they said the difference is that a trader can bump his head in the morning, get into a fight with his spouse, and then go make some really bad trades, which start an avalanche, and the whole stock market crashes. This is humans, and so we also learn differently. We're very individualistic, but we like charismatic personalities. That's why we watch shows, we watch TV, we like leaders, and so this is very important, as you said. Comes to preaching and when it comes to teaching, when we learn, when we say we have bad teachers, I mean, I don't want to be mean to anyone, I'm not going to name any, but the ones who came and said, this is really exciting. I am so thrilled to be here. It's like, no, you're not, you can't. Whereas if someone comes in, I had a science teacher who jumped on desks and say, I'm a particle, bah, and we were teenagers. We laughed and it was nuts, but we loved that class and we went there. And that was my best grade in chemistry my whole life. So there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of like Dead Poets Society. I mean, rare are the times that you find those teachers. And my second IT job, I actually ran a school district And what I found, interestingly enough, in New York, we had a unionized teacher system. So everybody would, day one, you're in the union. So that offers you some protection and whatnot. But you also had a tenured system. So you had 3 years to gain tenure in there. And it was this big political thing. And the sad thing to me was I'd watch a lot of this young, and in New York, you need a master's degree too. So typical career path is they'd finish out with a bachelor's degree. And as long as they committed to do a master's in so much time, they could get hired on. So now they're a young person coming in to teach. They're full of energy. They're going to change the world. They have all these great ideas. And now they have this leveraged pressure of doing enough things to get tenure, hoping to keep that job. And what I watched was kind of that burnout, because I mean, I'd watch some teacher come into an elementary school and they would just do the most amazing things. Like they'd be a music teacher, but really they were a singer songwriter and they're playing like 8 different instruments and they're engaging all the kids doing all these wonderful things. And yet you're watching them just get crushed by a system. And you wonder if that system was the old timers that were like, listen, I'm tenured. I could basically burn the school down and they would give me a training class of why this was inappropriate and probably still give me a raise, right? So you have that and then it burns people out. So at least in the States, I think all the really great teachers, these young ones come out, not to knock the people that have been doing it forever being a thing, but yeah, just that energy and connection. And you're right, tech evangelism. I mean, probably like 8 years ago or so, we probably started hearing that term and you're like, that's dumb. And now I'm like, no, it makes sense. And people would say that in my role, because a lot of times, even when I was a CIO and different things, you kind of get called into those sales engineering kind of things on the larger customers. And they're not buying your product. They're not buying anything. They're buying you and what you bring, that you have knowledge, but you can be cool and collective, that you're knowledgeable, but you're not boring them in the details. So yeah, personality is, I think you hit the nail on the head. So I pretend I have a personality. Sometimes I just have to rent it though. I don't know, but fun stuff. You were here last time and you dropped the word doom. God, that brought me back in time. Holy cow.
Yeah. I was a baby. No, I always say that at my work is you get luckily we're not in the office anymore, because if we were, I get the looks, because you talk about something and you look at the starry eyes. What are you talking about? And I think doom is one of those things. But the problem is what people don't understand, which I liked about the old games. The new games are so realistic. The old games, even the 2D ones, you went to a different world, there was only 2 dimensions. So you knew that was separate. Was now, it's just like, even the ones where you put on the virtual reality ones, I have enough games and problems and fun in real reality. Why should I emulate this? Right. I mean,
Oh yeah, I'm with you. I tell people I was such a gamer and 2 games ruined it for me. Some version of Star Trek that came out that I sat on the same level and couldn't get to the next level. You know what I mean? It was like you had to randomly go to a panel and push some weird spot to get something. You could not figure this out with like a playthrough. And I thought, that ruins it, man. Like, I don't mind a little bit of challenge, but Myst was the ridiculous one for me. People were like, this is the game. And it looked beautiful and it did all this. And I was like, why would I know to go to the 9th bookshelf and open the book to the 43rd page? No, you got to buy the book that goes with it. I'm like, no, man. Like, you'll laugh. One of my favorite games that was so hard, Nintendo Entertainment, NES, the original.
Oh, wow.
DuckTales, man. DuckTales. I love the daylights out of it. Or Turtles. Turtles was just like the game that nobody beat. I don't know that anybody beat it.
Well, when you think about it, it's the gaming. The problem, what you described, is we have enough gaming in our life where we have to solve problems, challenges, and we don't always win. And what we liked about gaming when it's simplistic is you can just turn your brain off, do something, and you succeed. Or it's a little bit complicated. Well, you don't want to lose there, too. I mean, here I just had a problem at work. I didn't get my raise. I go play my game. I get kicked out at the first level. I mean, come on,
Yeah, but Pokemon Go, I mean, crazy when that dropped. Being a Boy Scout leader, I remember we took, and Jonah was one of them, we took like 8 kids out to New Mexico and to do a 70-mile backpacking trek. And while we're going around, we're just stopping at all these gyms and everything. And people are popping out of the car and finding Pokemon. And there's like 30 people at, like you said, a trash can in the middle of nowhere. And you're just like, what is this? But I was really surprised that some people manipulated it. So like when they were selling their house, they would put like some character or creature there. So so that you'd all get swarmed when they were selling their house. And I thought, oh my God, people are really going to latch onto this Pokemon Go. Is if you have that next game, imagine the advertising power, because we know they're collecting your data.
Marketing.
Yeah, exactly, in there. But the other day I was by Jonah, and you were actually playing Pokemon Go, weren't you? Like, you're still an avid Go, aren't you?
Yeah, every now and then I fire it up, usually just a couple times a week for maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day.
So it's still around.
Yeah, it's still pretty big. It was originally inspired off of another game, Ingress. That one never really took off as much. I don't know if that's around, but that's what they based a lot of the spots and gyms around originally, was data from Ingress. And then they tried to launch a Harry Potter one, but I think that one kind of fell flat on its face and shut down after a year or two.
I would think Harry Potter should have just knocked it out of the park. Like, Pokemon Go, I'm like, I don't want to catch them all. This sounds like work. Like, I have to have a poster on my wall with 100, and now it's 1,000,000 in battle. But Harry Potter, I'm not a huge Harry Potter guy. Like, I'm not wearing a Hufflepuff shirt or whatever, but like, I dig it. Like, it was cool, especially because when I worked in the schools, like, you'd watch little like second graders like be online at a bookstore at midnight to get a book. When have we ever seen that phenomenon ever? And my younger son, he was never a reader as a kid. And same thing, like second or third grade, he came home from the library with this huge Harry Potter. And I was like, dude, I can't even get you to read a comic book. There's no way you're going to read this book. And his librarian was like, no, I'll credit him one chapter, which will count as a book or something. And he flew through it, and it was just launched. So I thought, when they launch a Harry Potter, I may actually try to dabble in it. And I don't know. It just didn't become a thing, but I thought they owned it.
It's one of those things with successful things in general. You wonder why certain things hit the ball of the park and certain don't. Just to go back on the Pokemon Go, though, which I thought was funny, was the conspiracy theorist. There was this lady on my street who thought it was the end of the world, that what was going to happen was everyone was going to basically go to Niagara Falls and jump in or something. And I said, I don't play Pokemon Go. I mean, at the time I said, if you made it beer go, where you go and you get a free beer, I can see myself, yeah, it might be a problem. And, you know, back in the day, I quit drinking beer. But there are people who got really worried that, oh my God, this is it. You know, it's the Martians controlling us, and it's just a matter of time. But you'll always have people with different tastes. And so you have to find a game we all like, which is very difficult with all our different views and things.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think it took a lot of people by surprise, myself included, but one thing people don't know is, even before Pokemon Go launched for a number of years now, Pokemon in general has been the highest grossing media franchise in the world, even beating out like Star Wars, Marvel, Hello Kitty.
Wow.
Like, and if you look, it's like significantly above the rest. Like, I think you can combine number 2 and 3 and still fall short of what they gross between the video games, the anime, the mangas, the card game.
I don't know, man. I just go back to my original like NES or Super Nintendo. That was my heyday, and you're like on a Zelda, and it was just like, Zelda was just mind blowing. And then I look at it now, and Geoff, you're right. It's so real looking. It's like I'm on a real horse and I drop down and talk to a fairy. Hey man, that's cool, but I kind of dig the old 16-bit, and my sword's launching across the screen, and I'm going through this wall, and it's just like, it was, like you said, it was challenging, but I could figure it out. Now it's almost like this random character comes up and they're like, this is a calculus question, answer it. And you're like, oh God, I don't know how to do calculus. Let me Google it. And I'm just like, that's no fun. So maybe one day in my life, I will be a little more excited. For me, I just kind of like working on something, like go to a car or a tractor or something, spin some wrenches. That is not too crazy. Like, I'm not going to bore out cylinders and do things like that, but like, oh, the water pump's leaking, and it fought me a little bit, but I got it. And just feeling that satisfaction of it is just where I'm in. I think that's what I want in a game. I've never heard it explained that way, but I think you're right. You want to have some success in this fantasy world.
And also be able to tune out is the other thing I think we used to do. We tune out. And the problem is, if you have a game which is too powerful, too realistic, too virtual reality, you're just tuned in. One thing that people could sometimes never understand is that it can be relaxing doing. We had this game called, I think it was NHL 2008, whatever, and the graphics weren't great. Another reason too, of course, is now you want to play a good game, you better have a very expensive computer. That's another story. But you could just tune out this little silly graphics, whatever. And that was kind of a relaxing, meditative state. Now, I will say where I'm excited about the virtual reality is for things like training and learning. So in other words, if I want to replace my kitchen sink, I can Google it and all that and look at a YouTube video. But it'd be nice to put on virtual reality things and blow a hole in my wall by accident in virtual reality before I do it in my real wall.
Virtual reality is my rainy day exercise device. I have my office on one side of the house. I ran a fiber optic display port and some USB extenders, boosters through the attic into my living room, and I've got a Valve Index in there. And yeah, when it's raining, I fire up Beat Saber, and I've got some like weighted vests and stuff that goes on my arms, adds like 20, 30 pounds, and I just sit there, and you will work up quite a sweat, especially with the added weight on your chest.
Yeah.
It's Ready Player One. It's exactly like that book or movie. It's just, I guess that's really going to be a thing at some point. And I don't know. I've moved out a little more country, and so I start my life in New York. I moved to Texas. And I'm in Dallas, so it's really still kind of like cleaner New York, smaller scale. And then I moved to the beach, so I become like a beach hippie. And now I move like 30 minutes off the beach, and I'm just like country pasture, whatnot. And I'll be God's honest truth. My internal clock feels so much different. I could not imagine just getting into a virtual game. Like, I could do it. Like, it's awesome. Like, I totally love it. Like, Jonah and I did The Void one time. They've all closed, but like, we're walking through these cement, like 4 or 5 rooms in this little chamber, and we're wearing a vest. We're wearing these goggles. We're walking through, and like, we're in a Star Wars experience, and we walk by lava, and there's heat lamps blowing heat at us.
Wow.
Like, and we're on an elevator, so the floor is moving. It feels like you're in a lift. It was the greatest experience ever. COVID killed them, and they had different adventures. So it's a fun experience, but I'll tell you what, just sitting outside, feeling nature, crickets chirping, it's weird. So now even just walking from the house to the shop or something, like, my clock is different. So I wonder how we as human beings are going to overcome that until, I guess, virtual reality becomes reality. I guess maybe at that point I'll be sitting in a simulation and those things will be there, but I can't imagine the energy movements.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as always, you look at human history, eventually there's a kind of medium it comes to. You get extremes. You take the Industrial Revolution, where cities were just horrible. I mean, and then massive industrialization, just horrible, disgusting place to be. And you look at cities now, one of the most interesting experiences I had was I was in Germany in the Ruhr Valley. That was heavy industrialization. And now they've converted some of these old factories into like theaters with the industrial theme and all this. There's parks coming out of there. The industry is there, but it's now different. They've merged. They've realized, yes, we do need a city, but we need to make this livable. If you look at some of the, like downtown Toronto and the ports area in the 70s, it was yucky. I mean, parking lots and metal and cement. Now, huge parks being built down there. And it's not they've taken anything away. They've just merged it. They've come to this realization. And so I hope that that'll be the case of virtual reality, especially if it comes to people who have impairments, who for whatever reason can't experience what we experience. This might help them. That's my hope, at least. Human beings tend to be pretty rebellious at the end of the day. If we're forced into something we really don't like, we're not going to do well at it. And one hope is that cooler heads and smarter heads prevail. We have a combined reality, or a better real reality, but virtual reality helps. Enhances, perhaps.
Well, what's also crazy is how long some of this technology has been around. I mean, look back to decades ago with the Virtual Boy, or I guess it's probably referencing the same thing, but, you know, Disney's innovation ride of progress at Disney World, where they're like, oh, the 90s are going to be all this virtual reality and this and that.
Yeah.
I love Geoff just basically said the Matrix there. If you didn't realize it, he's like, we as humans rebel. And if we're in virtual reality, I'm like, oh, as the machines take us over, some of us will reject it and take the red pill and whatnot and eject out. But, you know, it's crazy because, and I'm going to preface this, I do not believe this at all, but I'm really starting to wonder where they talk about, are we living in a simulation? And some people are now like, and they're like, listen, if we are, does it matter? Like, if I am a simulation, someone's created me or whatever, kind of like, I guess, like intelligent design to the next level, not to be too philosophical, but like, if something did create me, whatever it is, and we're in a simulation, does it matter? And I was like, well, that's true. But more and more and more, I realize, like, as we have the advent of AI and we have the advent of things around us in virtual reality, are we essentially going to become to that level where one day, kind of like at the end of that movie, Vanilla Sky, where you're like, yes, this has all been this other reality that we've been in. How do we know we're not there now? And I just thought, man, that's crazy. And I used to be like, you said, like conspiracy people, like, it's just crap and whatever.
Yeah.
But then you start reading, I can't even understand this stuff. I read one the other day, was like, okay, so they're talking about matter existing in our universe. And if there's derivative other universes, which they believe there are, that means essentially for us to be in the 1 in a trillion shot to exist, there's basically almost a trillion minus 1 that are almost like us that don't exist. There's more of non-existence than existence. And you're just like, oh my God, like how does somebody's like Hawking's brain, how did it wrap its head around this all? So insane.
One thing, you mentioned that, I would recommend everyone to watch Fassbinder's World on a Wire. This is a 1974 German television production. Can't remember based on what book, but it is the original Matrix. And it's fascinating. You can find it on Criterion. It's on YouTube, actually. I think it's there, and it's got subtitles. But basically, they have this simulacron, they call it, which is simulated world, which they're running. And then I want to tell you the story because I'll ruin it. But basically, they find out that they are too. But, when you think about it, again, this gets very philosophical and whatnot. You look at nature and you look at all the patterns. In a way, we are assimilated is what we're in a sense. We have an environment, the Earth environment we live in is a kind of simulation in the sense that if you go to the moon, it's a totally different environment, right? So it's not I'd say this, it's not as abstract and crazy. I think the question comes in, and this is where it gets difficult, is what is controlling? Because then you're starting to get into religious beliefs, you're getting into beliefs of is there an old person there, or are these humanoids doing this, or is this, and that's the problem. And what I always say to myself, I tell my kids is, there are certain things that we are capable of comprehending. And there are certain things which it's not that we're not, it's just that whatever mechanisms we have now, our brain, whatever, will end up in an endless loop because we can't find the answer, at least not now. And so you have to determine logically, how far will I go down that road before I go too far? I think it goes back to like the Nietzsche idea about a philosopher who's broken free and's on the hill by themselves and they go insane kind of thing. And so it's the same thing with that. It's not a crazy thought. I always talk, when they talk about, for instance, life after death and things, I say, well, if someone had told me when I was growing up, you could take an encyclopedia of knowledge and put it over the air, our Wi-Fi, to a different location, I'd say they were crazy. And through the air, what? Radio waves? You go 300 years ago, 400 years of radio waves. So this kind of thing, I think we have to control our imagination, control our desires and emotions, because sometimes we like to see these things and then we put in our own desires and emotions into what reality should look like. And that's dangerous. But accept these things are possible. Not freak out, but at the same time, filter, put a slow down on our brains that suddenly accelerate into the imagination world, right? And also take Hollywood and other television things with a grain of salt, obviously.
That's one of the reasons that I fell in love with like divinity and whatnot. And I don't mean like,
yeah,
I guess I should say like the study of divinity and going to a seminary. It was the discovery of figuring out the more I know, the less I actually do. And realizing, at least in the Western world here, we are in the United States predominantly Christian, Judeo, Muslim. And when we look at those from a Western lens, it becomes very transactional and mathematical. Like we've dumbed it down over the years to be like, do A and B and C and you go to heaven or whatnot. And then you start realizing that the epicenter of these religions are actually Eastern. And when we talk about Eastern religions, we think about very much more mystical, if you will. And one of the best books I ever read, and this is not for kids at all, is Lamb by Christopher Moore. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically this book is Jesus grew up and could not sin. So his best friend Biff had to do all the sinning so Jesus could experience it.
Oh, interesting.
And the opening and it's comically funny. And it's covering the years of basically when he was in Egypt and whatnot. Complete fiction, but yeah, it really got your brain working. But like, I love it because the opening scene is something like, Biff's talking about this weird family that moved to town, and his name was Jesus, and his family had to keep moving around because his face kept appearing on toast. And so every time his face would appear on toast, they'd have to move. And the first time he meets Jesus, he's with his little brother Matthew, and Matthew smashes a little lizard and kills it. And Jesus would pick it up, put it in its mouth, and come back to life, and he'd give it back to Matthew. And it was this cycle. So he talks about this whole thing. And it is probably sacrilege in every Christian circle until you open your mind and go, it really is bringing up a lot of those things. So some of the things that I really loved, not at all to be religious, but it was like, okay, this concept in Christianity of God and being all powerful, all knowing, and ever present. And so you'd be like, he's all powerful. And then I had a seminary professor one time ask me and say, what is the most powerful force in the universe as God's created it? And you're like, well, it's God. And they're like, no, it's not God. And I'm like, wait, but you just told me God is all powerful. That has to be. And you're like, did God give us free will?
Yeah, exactly.
And so can he force you to believe in him? And you'd be like, well, no. And they're like, so your free will is more powerful than God. You're like, no, but God's all powerful. He created it. So God is now self-limiting. And basically what the really good professors would say, like you were going back to this with teachers, they were so much fun because they would just, your mind would just short circuit.
Yeah.
And you'd just be like, wow. And so it's interesting. I shared about being this minister sort of thing. And what I realized was maybe I'm not in that realm because maybe I'm more of a universalist. So without it all going down any roads, I'm just like, well, wait a minute. In Christianity, if we're like, God came, God died, God saved, salvation's there. Well, if he did it for one, he did it for all. So all dogs go to heaven. Well, that's kind of Pauline in thinking. And then you're like, we have all these offshoots of religions. And then in Christianity, we have this book of Revelation, which, come on, nobody can understand this. I don't care. It's just like apocalyptic language of just words by somebody that can't even describe things that they're seeing in this vision. But you're just like, every chapter is kind of like, and then this church did this and they got this right and this wrong. And then we had to reconcile. And I'm just like, I don't know that it even matters anymore. Like, can we just do good and let it all shake out? And maybe I'm burning in hell. I don't know. But like, I don't want to torture people here. I don't want religion to be a weapon. I just want to be like, cool, you having a crappy day? I'm here. Why? Because, well, you know, this is who I am, and I hope you can pay it forward sort of thing. And that's what great teachers have done. So that was always my draw. So when we talk about these computer simulations, I'm like, is it God? Is it an alien? Is it whatever? Well, geez, I just don't know. And one of the last guys I worked for in the church, he'd be like, listen, dude, like, and this guy was like 70 and I'm like 35. And he's like, listen, sometimes we need to give people answers. That's what they want. They're on their deathbed. They're 90 years old. They want to be told it's going to be okay. They're going to be okay. And then I'm on the other side going, I'm 35 years old. This person's 90. They should be telling me things. Like, who wants to listen to a young little kid going, oh, you're just going to go to heaven because everything's okay. And this 90-year-old salt dog who's been through like World War II is like, really? You know, I watched whoever, and you're like, teach me, Obi-Wan. So, I will never subscribe to religion because I think it causes too much division and whatnot. When I get to know human beings, I find out people that I should quote unquote almost hate. And I know we're not supposed to do that. They're human beings. Why would I hate this person? So, you know, I think
also intuitiveness is important. That's one thing we forget. Unfortunately, philosophy, there's a couple of things you touched on, which are really important. One is, a lot of people don't want to take that route. It's a scary route. It's a scary route to ask questions because that involves accepting the fact you don't know and it's uncomfortable. But there is something that I've noticed travels around the world. There's an intuitiveness, and what that is, I don't know. My suspicion is it's like with artists. An artist will take something and will paint it. For instance, if you take painting, and they're not trying to make a photograph. They're trying to represent that as it goes through them, the way they see the world. And perhaps, and you look at a lot of things that humans build, you can see things in nature and they're similar in the construction, and it's an intuitive thing. But what I found about people, and again, if you go to simulations, whatnot, which is unique, is that different people around the world, different cultures, whatever, there is an underlying knowledge of, you know, this, I shouldn't do this. And it's not even moral. Maybe it goes back to the survival of the species, that if all humans just were purely egotistical, we wouldn't be able to live in a group. If we can't live in a group, we're not very strong beings compared to others. But one other thing I'll point out about human beings, now we're on philosophical topics, is the willpower, which you talked about, which is fascinating. humans, I watch my cat a lot. I love to watch my cat, and the cat will do things, whatever, but it's always kind of following a kind of rule. But I can just right now take this piece of paper and move it here for no reason, just because I'm proving I'm Geoff. And now I'm going to change, and basically I'm changing the universe because that piece of paper lives there, and that piece, that airspace. I'm just because Geoff wants to prove he's Geoff is going to do that. And I could do that all day long, do something ridiculously. There's no instinct in me telling me to move that piece of paper. I don't need to eat it. It's not going to help me survive. It's not going to help me create another Geoff. I'm just doing it to be Geoff. And that seems to be kind of unique. I don't know if, people have talked about intelligence levels being high in dolphins and whatnot. Perhaps there's something similar. Play is another thing. But willpower is important. We do. And that same thing comes back to making decisions, as you said. At the end of the day, take a lot of religions together. There is this idea of responsibility, a shared responsibility model in IT. You have to be responsible for what you do. And if you have an intuitive sense that what you're doing is bad people around you, or just it's going to be negative, whatever negativity is, but you do it anyways because you're overcome with greed or desire for something, that has a result. Maybe that's a rule of the simulation. It will trigger this, But again, you go down these rabbit holes like Kubernetes and programming. It's, oh my God, as they walk out. But it's fascinating. I think these conversations are good because it opens your mind more. You start asking more questions, and then you don't become vulnerable to spammers, to phishing, to ransomware, to being just lied to. So that's my opinion on a Friday. On a Monday, I'd be much more in a much worse philosophical mood.
Well, we watched Band of Brothers this past week. We watch it every now and then. And there's this one part where one of the guys is talking. And he's talking about basically when he has to kill Germans. And he's like, being in West Virginia or wherever, I looked at this other guy across from me and I thought, well, he might like the same things I like. Like he might like to hunt and fish and do it. And another place at another time, we might be good friends. And I was just like, I think that's what we miss. And you hit the nail on the head, man. It's world travel. We are horrible about this in the United States. We are such a large country. We traverse our country. Honestly, some people don't even get out of their own state. I mean, Texas is huge, but even some of the small ones, or their city, and they just kind of have this worldview based off of experience and what they've been fed. And when I've traveled around the world, like we went to Sydney this past winter, and I spent about a month there in New Zealand, Sydney, Fiji, wherever. And my wife and I loved Australia so much. I was like, if I didn't have kids back home or my mom, and I probably would have sent back word like, sell everything we own. We don't care. We're going to live here. I'm like, it's this melting pot of a city of so many different cultures that everybody was really polite. It was super clean. The economics seemed to fall in line. They had some universal health care that seemed to be working. And they're like, well, certain things are a challenge, but you can privatize certain things. But if I need a knee, I might wait 2 years, but I'll get my knee. But if my heart's exploding, they'll take care of me. And they're like, we pay a lot of taxes, but I get 200 sick days if I need it. And I'm just like, my arm could fall off tomorrow and I have the world's best health insurance and I would be so screwed in the US. And I have no idea what it would be like. But when I traveled there, I was just like, mass transit, this is wonderful. And I know a lot of people back in the States, they don't take the time to take those trips because they think, oh, it's just a vacation. For me, it's getting to know my fellow man and the rest of the world. So if Australia's on the news tomorrow going, oh, well, this horrible event happened, I could go and think about those actual people.
It is a form of education. There's no doubt about it, travel.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always do when I travel is I never take the taxis, unless it's dangerous, of course, or the Ubers. I take the train. I get into the environment of the people because then you actually live it. You see it. You smell things. A car and Uber is the same in every country. A highway is the same in every country. I mean, some might have more bumps or whatever, or potholes, but around the people is different. But I think it was an education. You learned more things. You saw different ways of doing things. In fact, you think about humanity, why we've gotten. It's not because of singular group. It's because everyone's copying one another. Some group does something better. Everyone copies them. And that's just been and that's how so it's cooperation. Sometimes copying when we're fighting, unfortunately, but that does result in make it better. Plus, Australia, the weather is probably fantastic too. Of course, in Texas, you guys don't have too bad weather either, so compared to us.
Texas, everything tries to kill you. So where I live, we have hurricanes. We do have tornadoes. We have tons of venomous snakes, but Australia laughs at us when they're like, oh, you have venomous snakes? We're Australia. Here's 1,000,000 ways to kill you. You only had 1,000. So it's great. But again, it's just the humanity. Like, we have this situation going in Iran, and I'm not getting into politics of it, but I'm going to go into the Western Christianity of it, right? Like, we somehow do this dumb little equation. We're like, do this and this and believe this and say this and you're here. And I used to tell people, and it would upset them, I'd be like, imagine that somebody in a foreign country such as in Iran, Iraq, wherever, watched their entire world be bombed apart and everyone they love dies. And they basically are shown that these American people are doing this and we're the face of Christianity. So one day you're going to sit this child down that's grown their whole life and you're like, you have to pray the prayer to white American Jesus. And I'm like, it's just not going to happen. So does this poor person go and burn in eternal flames of hell? I'm like, you serve a loving God, but yet this is what you would do to somebody? Like, there's no way they're going to get their head around that. That is not anything that is even feasible. And we are never going to heal if you keep the stupidity crap up. And that's pretty much why I think they almost kicked me out of pulpits, because again, it's like I would love to go meet people. Like, some of the most wonderful people in the world I've ever met have the most, opposite views of me on things.
Yeah.
And if I can appreciate that in them, it's amazing. And I'll joke, in the U.S., I'm like, I think I'm kind of libertarian. And so in the U.S., when you say that, I don't know if you know, you picture gun-toting Ted Nugent going crazy. And I'm just and I'm like, no, that's not me. No, I don't have my compound and whatnot. To me, I'm like, you should be free to be who you want to be. I should be free to who I want to be. And I don't really want to impose me on you or you on me. So like, if you need some pronouns or whatever, and that rocks your world, I'm going to do my best to respect you to do that. But I always ask that person, and I'm like, can you be respectful of me? Like, my son's with somebody that uses pronouns, my younger son. And so they, them, like, which is great. And I had a really awesome conversation with this person. I said, listen, I'm trying to be very respectful of you, but my grammar is built around these words meaning something else. So when I'm fumbling through it, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. When I say they, to me, that's a group of people going somewhere. And I joke and say those Catholic school nuns beat it into me that would be it. And unfortunately, I can't overcome this. And this person tells me, they go, well, I said, I almost wish you'd invent a new pronoun. Like, I don't care what it was. And they told me, no, actually that has become a thing. But the challenge is there's so many derivatives of it. And I'm like, see, I need to loop into things that are a little easier for my brain to handle. And I want to be respectful. But what was great is I was like, in the year 2024, I met a person who's probably 25, 30 years younger than me, and able to have them understand, I'm really trying to support you and you. Can you give me some grace, knowing and credit that I'm doing this? And when I screw up, it's because I'm really trying, but you're doing 40 years of reprogramming my brain. And that's what it is. It's those neural pathways. And being able to have that conversation is a different take than when I look at CNN or NBC, all these news stations in the US, where it's just like, this old white guy hates these young people with pronouns and and we have hate. And I'm just like, no, because if you ever met a human being, I don't think some of these people would do the detestable or horrible things that they say they do when they realize that's a human being on the other side of the street.
Also, the thing I'll mention here too, which is important, is that, which I always, so I'm careful with because I did linguistics, is that unfortunately English language especially tends to think, well, we have a problem. This is a problem. It's an injustice or something like that. Let's change the language. And whether that works or not, I don't know. I always tell people to be careful not to put too much energy into the icing, but think of the cake inside of it. So in other words, in your situation, you obviously are not antagonistic towards this person, but it's very difficult because the language was built for a different purpose. And so I think your path is better. Create a new pronoun. I'm not against the original system. And it's not so much for old people confusion. It's because there were structures and rules were put in place or evolved, put it that way. And it's very difficult. And these are, again, the question is evolved to change them overnight. We tend to see in human history when humans try to revolutionary change things overnight, it can get very messy. You take the Russian Revolution, for instance. It was supposed to be the beautiful brand new world because we've gone in with our muscle and we're trying to force nature to do something on a level like that. And they used to have banners all over the place. We're building this, whatever, where the reality was different. So I always say to people, that's fine and do things like that. But also don't lose focus on the real thing. The laws that prevent injustice, prevent discrimination, the laws, the rules, like the things that really do things. That's one thing I'd say about that. The other thing too, I'd say, which I'm using as a mantra now to people, is always question and constructively criticize those who you love most, the leaders you love most, the ones you believe in the most, constructively criticize them the most, constructively, not just this imbecilic whatever. And the reason why is this. Everything you say is totally true, but there's another factor which we can't ignore. There are people, unfortunately, it's not they're evil, they've become enslaved for greed or for, they can become addicts, whatever, who manipulate others. They will take good beliefs or beliefs in general and then manipulate you, right? And you never really know. And the minute you like somebody, you already start cutting them some slack. I really like this person. Think about it. They say something a little bit off. Well, but it's something you don't like. It's right where you're going to nail them, right? So that protects you and your group from extremely good manipulators who are out there. You look at the ransomware disasters, the phishing techniques. You think of the techniques in IT. What are the most successful ones? The human engineering ones, the ones where... So I always say that, and that would help us a lot in our politics and everything. And it doesn't matter what group you are or what you believe in, because if someone's manipulating you and you ask the right questions, it's like you're in a relationship with another human being, be it, a spouse or a partner or whatever you want to call it. These things happen. People become untrustworthy. They take advantage of you, right? And you deal with that. Same thing there. And I think if humans got better at that, got better at dealing with their blind faith. We always have blind faith. Love is blind faith. Let's face it, that's a thing. But we got better at dealing with it, that sometimes it's not happening. Sometimes we've blindly in love, as they say. And so I think that's important. That would help us. We're emotional creatures, and we sometimes let our emotions take over this very powerful tool we have on top of our head.
Oh, you're right. I watched some of my friends on Facebook, and I'm a stalker on Facebook. I kind of regurgitate some things, but I'm more of a reader. And it saddened me because people that I've known would be like, one I read this past week was like, the problem with our country is that these people just don't have intelligence and something like that. And I was just like, well, how cruel is that? Like, I know this person might be a Democrat or whatnot, but I'm going, right. So everybody that didn't vote for your guy is just stupid. Why would you not just even go to the basic fabric of, hey man, like maybe they saw the pros and cons on that other side, and I'm going to apply it to either candidate because I don't give a crap,
Yeah.
Both of them suck. Welcome to the US. I'm just like, maybe they're like, well, I'd really like a little bit more at the border security over here. And I know that this clown is doing this, but I'm really scared that this is a thing. Whereas on the other side, they're like, all people melting pot, just let them come in. And it's like, I agree, but I'm worried, right? Like, this is a conversation. I'm like, did you just call somebody that thinks differently than you stupid? Because that's what you did. And it's like, I know you. Did you really mean that? I had a friend of mine. We were friends forever. This was shocking. Like, after Trump won his election, like, this guy went off the rails like a lot of people did, but it wasn't about Trump. He was just like, there's no water in Flint, Michigan, and we should just storm and do this. And I was like, dude, you're like my hippie friend. Like, you're a pacifist. Did you just like basically encourage people to take arms and storm? He's like, yeah, man. And if you can't handle it, and I'm like, dude, I think you're better than this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you won't even fight anybody over a paperclip. And he's just like, no longer a friend. And I'm like, we have lost our minds on some level. And I would hope my friends would ever be like, Tom, you're just insane. Like, dial it back, militia man, or dial it back, hippie dude. Like, it was crazy. I used to love it in the church, like the old timer that I was telling you earlier about. They always thought like he was like the right wing conservative dude, and I was like the leftist crazy guy. And the reality was, this guy was like, I'm in the middle of the road. This guy was lefter than left, but he would laugh his butt off because behind the scenes he'd be like, yeah, whippersnapper, everybody thinks you're the hippie. And I'm like, independent middle. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you're bluer than blue. And we just laughed because people just thought that's who we were. And I was like, if they really ever knew us, they'd be shocked. They would just be shocked. And it's humanity. I mean, that's the beauty. And honestly, when we talk about community, that's what's been awesome to me, is meeting all these people around the world, and you get to hear about their daily life, and you're like, wow, they live wherever. And it's so different. Like, I look at you, Geoff, like I'm always like, is he in Canada? Is he in Europe? He talks about all these places. He's been all over the world. But you hear that more outside of the U.S. In the U.S., we're just like, yeah, I lived in New York and then I went to Texas, and people talk to me and they're like, that's mind blowing. And I'm just like, it sounds like you've lived like 15 places across the world. I don't know.
Well, you get that in Canada too. So it's not unique. I think the problem with our continent, and I guess probably in Australia too, there are distances, there's economic problems as far as traveling somewhere, you have to have the money. But there's also sometimes, there's just a comfortableness, I'd say. Funny enough, though, my daughter's at university here, and we have a big group of people from mainland China. And because there's very, it's closed society, some of the views there are really interesting in the sense of you see what happens when societies are closed. So you expect a certain type of behavior from a certain group, and you named it earlier. You can see the same type of behavior, and much more so because of closed society. One thing I point out about that, and I always say, I had a job once where I had to deal with football hooligans in the UK. Long story. But I looked at them and I suddenly understood something whereby, they go with their scarves, they have their colors, it's like gangs, whatever. And then it goes deep into how humans were able to succeed more. Groups here, they're limited resources, they get the resources. Another group wants them. And then they start to have some paraphernalia so they know each other, whatever. Unfortunately, it's the world we're in now is a very new world. Let's face it. 10,000 years ago, the world was very different. But we and these bodies were pretty much the same. There's been very little evolution. So we're very similar to our ancestors who were running around the jungle and fighting for limited resources. And we had our little group, right? It's very tribal. And I've seen a lot of problems with modern human beings is that we've accelerated our world enormously. Totally different environment. But we're stuck with, as they say, the fight and flight. We're stuck with the same, and that'll take a lot longer. And so we have to find ways to deal with this. And for instance, like sports, one of the reasons I encourage sports is because maybe these bodies were not made to sit behind a computer screen. They're made to be out there. Oh, I'm going to be eaten by a tiger. I'm going to be starving for 10 months. They're not going to be Geoff Burke in front of his computer and his full kitchen down there 24/7, anytime I want, So that's, I think, another thing. I think the problem with, we're so smart, we're sometimes too smart for ourselves. And we start to get too smart for nature too. And unfortunately, nature, whatever nature is has its rules, and it can be very, very strict and mean. So I think that when you ask people to contemplate things and to understand or try to, you're not going to understand, but to put into perspective what our lives are now and think about your ancestors 300 years ago, 200 years, even when I was growing up, we were all outside. There were no video games when they came in, and so that has affected us. And I think there are great things that come, but like everything, there's good and there's bad. So we have to understand what the not so good is and then try to mitigate. I don't think you can get rid of this stuff, but you can mitigate it and control it so there's less harm.
Yeah. And something that I've drawn upon is the movie Rudy. There's a scene where he's meeting with the priest, and I love it. He's like, there's two things I've learned: that there is a God and I'm not him. And I always have leaned on the second pillar of that. I'm not him, as in, I don't know it all. It's the mystery. And as a little kid,
but we are wannabes, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you didn't know, the whole term Christian comes from a derogatory statement that was like, look at the little Christ running around thinking that they're Jesus. It was like an insult if you didn't know.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know that.
So now we're like, somebody's a Christian. And it was like basically the Romans going like, there goes little Jesus thinking he's doing whatever, but it's true. And you're right. And so I'm just like, I think if it's like when I was a kid, the priest used to say something like, because I grew up Roman Catholic, it was like, let us proclaim the mystery of faith. And I was like, I don't know what this means. And now I'm just like, wait a minute. It just means I really just don't freaking know. Is it math based? Whatever. And when you have that, I think it brings about the humanity. But we got to look at Jonah now, because he's been like a sponge. He's been soaking it up.
Yeah.
Two old dudes are just rambling about the life. And he's just like, either you're stupid. Like, come on, dude, jump in. Like, where are you? Like, what are we? Like, what's your take on this?
I think just in general, people need a lot more patience and compassion and understanding. Seems kind of like some of what you guys have been going around. And it's something I always think, like, even myself, I'm too guilty of too quick of getting fired up or going to judge someone else or thinking they're dumb because they disagree with me or they have a different perspective on something or they don't know something that I know. It's like you always said as a scout leader, assume positive intent.
It's true. How many times do we have that in tech? Like, we can bring it back to tech, right? My friend was telling me about, remember the old Jimmy Fallon sketch on SNL, move, when he would go to do IT work, he'd just be like, move. And one day somebody came to me and they're like, that's totally you. And I found, like, in tech, if you didn't believe and use the tech that I wanted and thought you're just dumb, like, it's so obvious. Why am I even having this conversation? Lowly being that doesn't know as much as I do. And I had somebody one time, I actually was getting promoted at the time, and I was probably like 22 or so. And I remember they were like, hey, remember that old guy, Pat, over there? I'm like, yeah. He was like their guru, right? But he was always mad about the stupidest crap. Like, if you asked him one thing, he'd just like launch off in tirades. So you needed him, but you were ultimately like knowing you were going to be abused talking to him. And I remember they sat me down and like two different managers and they're like, you're really smart. You're a young guy, but you know what? You're going to be that dude if you don't dial it back. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. It took a good number of years to realize, yeah, I guess, it's like, how does one of the first MCSEs end up becoming like an Apple employee? Cause you're just like, converted to the dark side, right? You're just like, what the hell is this? And then you like it and you realize, have I betrayed my very core? We've been talking about religion and I use that all the time. Like, every time I walk into a company, I'm a VMware guy and like, I pray to God they're not Hyper-V. Like, I support it, but I'm just like, God, please. And when they're like, we're VMware, I'm like, oh, thank God I can say this now. Good. I don't have to say things like checkpoints and things like that and worry it's not going to work. But I always do this. I was like, listen, in all things technology, you choose your religion.
Yeah.
It is just a conscientious choice. And once you choose your religion, you're not changing another religion. So look at that guy that loves Hyper-V and be like, yeah, I guess it has good points. I don't really understand what you're trying to do. But, 20 years ago, I'd be like, you're the dumbest human being. Why would you use that sort of thing? And
folks, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I just realized I'm 10 minutes late for a meeting with my boss. So,
oh no,
but that's a good sign of a conversation when you ignore that. Look, this was so great. I could go on all day long, but as I said, it's 1:13. I'll make out some excuse. It wasn't working. Thank you very much for having me. That was great. And it'd be great to be talking to you folks again.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, everybody. Find Geoff Burke, ObjectFirst. Pay some bills for him. And that way his boss, when you go ahead and contact him, be like, we were listening when you ran late to that meeting. So we want to spend money with Geoff and he can go be a good place. And Jonah, as always, thanks for being my partner in crime. We'll talk to everybody. Catch you later.
Whether you're a seasoned solutionist or just starting out, the Rebel Devs podcast is a must listen. So join us. Comment, share, and subscribe. Be part of the Rebel Devs.